Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be ranking all the tracks in Gran Turismo 7. Now it's a bit of a different video, similar to I guess ranking the V10 cars, but that wasn't a Gran Turismo related video, so kind of combining the two different videos into one. Now I haven't really seen anyone on YouTube do this. I've seen one video which was okay, but it wasn't really in the style that I wanted to make mine, so I'm the first person to do it in this way, I guess. So, yeah, going to be talking about every single different track. I think -1. I think I'll talk about that a bit later. I'm going to be giving you my opinions on each one. I'm going to put them in a tier list and talking about what the best tracks are in the game, some of the worst tracks, and yeah. So, before we get started, one thing I do just want to mention is only a very small percentage of you lot are subscribed. So my views are actually pretty good at the moment, but my subscribers have been going down for some reason. So if you could help me out by just subscribing, that would be quite good, because I do put quite a lot of effort into these videos, hoping to get monetized soon. But yeah, so firstly, let's talk about how I'm actually going to be ranking these tracks. So we're going to be talking about 6 different factors. That is overtake potential. So how wide the track is and is it suitable for racing. So some tracks are really twisty, turny, small, kind of narrow. That's what I'm looking for. Tracks where you can't really overtake, or are they really wide tracks like Daytona or whatever, where it's perfectly set up for racing. Second one is probably something you didn't expect: elevation changes. Obviously, does it go down? Does it go up? So some tracks, or majority of tracks, are very flat. But it is nice when you get a little bit of height. You're driving down a hill or driving up a hill. That does just make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more engaging as well. Do the tracks have a range of turns? Do they have a range of straights? So some long straights, some short straights, tight corners, long flowing corners. And also, are they interesting? It's kind of a personal preference type thing. So it's not it's a bit more difficult to rate that. And also the scenery. Does the race have nice scenery? And I think if all of these factors, it's a nice flowing track with lots of turns, it's got good elevation changes, it's got nice scenery, it just means it's genuinely a good track. So let's start all the way down in the F tier. Now, the first two tracks will actually be grouped together. These aren't necessarily bad tracks, just they're basically useless in the game. And once you get past the tutorial, there isn't really much use for these tracks. And those tracks are Broadbean Raceway and Northern Alps Speedway. So like I said, they're not exactly bad tracks, they're just not really much use. So the reason why is because once you get more confident driving faster cars, you'll never actually race it. The track is simply designed just to get you used to driving, so there's no kind of other purpose. You can't really go fast, and there's just no really corners. And it's just not really suitable to be doing races once you go around in an oval, especially a tiny oval. So yeah, they can be fun, but they serve more as a tutorial for all the natural race. So that they don't treat them as bad, just treat them as a tutorial for you. However, there is one genuine track that I believe is in the F tier. Now this may shock some of you, but it's mainly based on my personal opinion. But even if it wasn't, it wouldn't be much higher on the list. And of course, I'm talking about Tokyo and all the other 200 variants that come along with it. So let's start off by saying that me, along with everyone in the Reddit community, hates this track. So where do we start? They butchered this remake of Tokyo. In the old game, it used to be a very big track, really good for racing, wide layouts, so wide roads, carry a lot of speed through the corners. But this one, the streets are so narrow that overtaking is really difficult. And if you do, you'll try and hit a barrier and inevitably get a penalty. I know people that have done the Castrol Supra license. That's not very good. There's in the Master license. There's a new video coming out soon. The Ferrari racing on this track is just hell. The corners are really tight, and while you can drive pretty fast, it's just really kind of unengaging. There's only so many times you can do the Tokyo 600 pp race. So yeah, this track is going to go in the F tier. There are quite a lot of different variants, but they're all kind of the same thing really. So it's nothing interesting, really bad track. Let me know if you think otherwise. So I am happy to say that they're the only F tier tracks. So now moving on to D tier, which are tracks that are very bad, need a rework, but not the worst thing ever. The first circuit in the D tier is Goodwood. Now once again, this isn't really a bad track, but it's just not very good either. It's just basically a cube. I think of it as more of it's a tutorial racetrack, if you will. It's just an upgrade from the other two. Yes, very good for beginners. But it's weird how this track is actually used for kind of mid to high level racing. So I can't understand why tutorial track is being used for Group 3 racing. It's a very simple layout of just kind of medium-sized straight, then a corner, and like I said, it resembles a cube. The only interesting thing is the set of barriers at the end, which can obviously, catch a lot of people out. I've seen that a lot of times. There's no scenery since it's just in the middle of a field, and it's a completely flat track, so it's very unengaging. So for this reason, this track, Goodwood, will be in the D tier. Next up in the D tier is Special Stage X. Now this isn't actually a racetrack, but I did have to include it in this video. So this is the go-to straight in the game for testing top speeds and drag races. Since it's so long, we never run out of space. Having to do races on is just impractical. It takes ages to complete, and you just sit at the top speed of your car for like 10 minutes. It's not a fun track. It's kind of it has one purpose. It does that purpose really well. All the other purposes it just does terribly, but it's not designed for them. So it's kind of unfair to rank it at the D tier, but overall in terms of a racetrack, it's in the D tier. So this is similar to the previous oval shaped tracks that were in the F tier. Reason why it's in the D tier and not the other ones is because it's actually a bit of a bigger track. It is very unengaging, but at least you can put your foot down and get some speed up. Track also flows a little bit nicer than the other ones. You can carry a lot more speed through the corners. So because of this reason, it is actually usable, to be fair. It's not a good track, but you can get away with using it. So yeah, it can be in D tier. Yeah, and the final track in the D tier is going to be Colorado Springs. This is just simply too small for racing. You're unable to properly put your foot down, as by the time you're getting some decent speed, the corner's already approaching. I don't race on dirt much, so I don't really have an opinion on this track, but it does seem pretty unengaging and lacking when compared to other dirt tracks in the game, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So yeah, I know a lot of people hate this track, so for this reason it's going to be in the D tier. Now moving on to the C tier. These are tracks that generally aren't very good, but you can race on them, they're not that bad. And the good thing is there's a lot more tracks as we ascending with more tracks, so generally the tracks in this game are pretty good. Now once again, the first track in the C tier is controversial. That is Willow Springs. Now I can see this car being anywhere from the A tier all the way to the F tier, all based on personal opinion. I've chosen to go in the middle and put it in the C tier, kind of taking my personal opinion out of it for this one. When you look at the criteria for what is a good track, as we already mentioned, it does actually score pretty well. There's some overtake potential on this track since it is actually quite wide. It does have quite a bit of elevation changes, particularly in that kind of corkscrew, the area I'm on about. Also has a wide range of turns, surprisingly, and a lot of range of straights as well. Nice long straight in the pits. And since it's in the desert, it does actually have it's quite an interesting track. There isn't really any other things like it. So you'd have thought, since it meets the criteria well, it's typical kind of B/A tier track. However, I know a lot of people do not like this track, especially on Reddit. Because of the camber and the sand, your car gets thrown off the track a lot, especially in older muscle cars when you kind of brake a bit too late and you're on the sands. I personally quite like the track, but I know a lot of people do not like this track. So we'll keep them all happy, keep everyone happy, and go in the middle with C tier. I think that's fair. The next track is Santa Cruz. Maybe I'm saying it's Santa Cruz. I hope I'm saying that right. So we can expect for a C tier track. Not very interesting, terrible flow, and just boring. Now, I have to confess, I've never really raced on this track at all, really. And I do know that a lot of people hate it when this track features in the weekly challenges. there's so many 90-degree turns that you just can't really get a good flow going. The corners don't flow nicely to one another, you can't keep speed through them. It just puts you off and makes time trials very difficult to get in a rhythm because it's just start and stop all the time. It's also a really flat track. I remember just driving this track once. I believe it was it a Group 1 challenge, or no, that's not true. It was the Formula 1 challenge, I think, something like that. I drove this once, never again. Let's move on. Next C-tier track is Autopolis. Now, once again, I'm not really raced on this track very much. I'm not really familiar with the Japanese tracks. It seems like an okay track because all the other tracks are a lot more recognisable and interesting. It's not really much going for this track, so I've chosen to put it in the C-tier. Now, getting through these C-tier tracks quite quickly, the next one is Kyoto. Similar to the previous one, that I've not raced here very much, but I have raced enough to notice that this track has an awful flow. You're not able to carry as much speed. It kind of really puts you off. You can't really drive straight, you have to turn, and it's just not really nice to drive on. Like I said, you constantly change direction. It's not very fun to race on, so for this reason it's going to go in the C-tier. Now, something a bit different, the final C-tier track is going to be Road Atlanta. Now, this isn't actually a bad track by any means. It's a relatively new track. Can't remember when it was added, but it was not in the game at launch, so it has been added in an update. It's quite a short track with minimal turns. You can get a nice flow going, and it's a relatively small track, so you can do it quite simply, get a lot of laps going, really get into it. It does have some pretty nice changes in elevation, but overall there's just nothing really special about this track. It does get overshadowed by other tracks in the game. So I'm going to be putting it in the very top of the C tier. Had it been a little bit bigger, just something more to it really, it could have been in the B tier. Now moving on to the B tier, this is for tracks that are actually pretty good. Fun to race around, but not amazing. Now, as you'd expect, most of the tracks in the game are in this sort of region, which is a good thing. If every track in the game was bad, you wouldn't really race at all, would you? So, let's get started in B tier with the first track. Now, I like this because it's only one of the UK tracks which is still in the game, and that is, a shame really. We did have the London track from Gran Turismo 6, that was pretty good. Silverstone, we also had GT7, that was also pretty good. But it's one of the, if you exclude Goodwood, it's the only proper UK track, let's be honest. So you're going to talk about the longer version. And it has some decent elevation changes right at the start with that cam really throwing you off. But it's very fun, challenging. Has a good range of turns and straights, some tight corners right at the start, some long flowing corners in the middle of the track. Has a nice flow, and you can really start to get into the track along as you drive. The only bad thing about this track is the lack of scenery, to be honest. Can make the track a bit boring after a while. You're just driving around in the field, really. Nevertheless, I still like the track a lot, and the option of a shorter variant of this track is also very nice. So particularly for slower cars, you can race there while still getting the first corner with all the camber. Okay, so the second track in the B tier is Catalunya. I hope I'm saying that right. This is the only Spanish track in the game. So we're going to be talking about the full Grand Prix course. However, I will mention about the short course and the rally course as well. Starting with the GP course. This course is actually pretty good. It's a typical European Grand Prix course. Wide range of turns, nice straights, and a good flow. Perfect for racing. The reason why this isn't higher is because it just simply gets overshadowed by the other European tracks. That's basically it really. It doesn't have many races in the game as well, I did notice. It has a nice Ferrari race, which if I remember correctly, but not much other than that, to be honest. If it had more races, I'd definitely put it in the A tier. Like many other circuits in the B tier, such as Brands Hatch I've just mentioned, it does have a short circuit variant that's good for slower cars where it takes a little bit longer to get around the tracks, but you can still get a feel of the track, and obviously it won't take as long for doing a short circuit. However, things get bad once we start talking about the rally cross variant. This is possibly the worst circuit in the game. It's bad because you can't get any speed up, too many tight corners, you're constantly changing direction. And these kind of cancel each other out. A good European Grand Prix circuit versus one of the worst circuits in the game. So I think being in the B tier is, I think B tier is deserved. So the next B tier track is a rally circuit, Fisherman's Ranch. Now this isn't a bad circuit, to be honest. It's just too repetitive and too long. You're essentially climbing a mountain and then you go down the other side. It does have a nice range of turns, some really tight ones, and some straights, and obviously since it's a rally circuit it does have a nice change of elevation, some decent scenery as well. But like I mentioned, it is a very long track. The gameplay you're seeing here is a 680 horsepower Celica, and it still took 3.5 minutes to complete. For slower rally cars this will take a very long time, too long. Think of it as a Nürburgring rally circuit, it's just not as good really. Probably the best dirt circuit in the game, or one of them. So for this reason the track is in the B tier. Now the next B tier track is Sardenga. Once again this track has many variants. This track is very nice, has some nice turns with a decent flow to it, to be fair. Has some nice straights, very long straight at the start. This also applies to the smaller version. On the big track the last corners do feel a little bit out of place, but other than that it's a nice track. Unfortunately it does get overshadowed by the other two Italian tracks, which happen to be very good. So for that reason this doesn't really get as much love as it should, but I think in the B tier is justified. So now we're getting into the next one, which will be Watkins Glen. In my opinion, this is probably one of, if not the best tracks that have been added to the game since launch. It's also one of the first tracks I'm actually mentioned so far that are genuinely good, which I consider to be genuinely good. Let's go through the list. So it's a wide track, plenty of overtake potential as I mentioned, great for racing of all classes. Has some nice elevation changes, mainly at the start and the middle of the track. These are good because they make the corners blind, challenging the driver, which is very fun. It can cause some chaos in some online races. Also has a good mix of straights and turns, and has a long swooping turn for the first corner, which is very nice. It does have some tight ones near the end as well, and some normal ones in the middle. It does have the typical American scenery, lots of trees and stands for some people watching. Overall I do like this track, and it's probably one of my favourite American tracks in the game, if not my favourite. Yeah, the short version is very good, it's essentially just a mini version of this track really. The next track is a fan favourite, I know that, and that is Daytona. Now there's two main versions in the game, the common NASCAR variant and the racing track version. Now the NASCAR, the oval, is a very fun version, long enough so you can get some serious speed up, but small enough so it doesn't get boring after a while. It's the default track to test car's performance really. The racing version is very different though, the track is very slim, so overtaking is quite difficult, but on the straight there's plenty of space. It does have some really nice turns and a good range of straights, arguably the best straight in the game, obviously on a NASCAR circuit. Obviously racing around a NASCAR circuit is classed as good scenery, I'd say. The only bad thing is the flow. It is hard to get a rhythm going on this track, but it's very fun to race, especially in faster cars. Now we're getting into the top of the B tier. Now these are very good tracks, but they're just not in the A tier because they have some small issues preventing them from being higher. First is into Lagos in Brazil. That's a really good track, which is very fun to race on. Overall the track does perform very well in all of the things we mentioned earlier. The only issue is that it's from South America. Now I know that's not an actual issue, but it means it usually gets excluded from a lot of the races. Most of them are either North American, European or Asian. So there's not really much to do at this track really. If we had more representation from South America, such as more tracks or more cars, this would be moved to the A tier. But since this isn't the case, it is going to have to stay in the B tier for now, but yes. And the final track in the B tier, the very top of B tier, is Magnolia. Now this is a very good track, lots of turns, very good flow, and a big change in elevation at the end with that satisfying corner. It does feel really nice to race here. I know the smaller version is also a very popular track, and a lot of people like that, primarily used for slower cars. This track has some very nice scenery and is really nice to drive. And although it was only added in GT6, I think it's already cemented itself as one of the greatest tracks of the series. For that reason it's in the B tier. The reason why it's not in the A tier is because there's other tracks that simply just outshine it really. Now onto the A tier. Now these are really good tracks, but unfortunately they're not the best tracks that have ever been in the Gran Turismo series, which I know is quite a big thing to say, but you know. First track in the A-tier is Alsace in France. It's one of the most fun tracks in the game, actually, in my opinion. There's constant changes in elevation in a good way, which throw your car all over the track. The scenery is also really nice. It's just such a fun track, going up and down all the time around these swooping corners. Yeah, as you can see in this Alpine, you don't have to race a really fast car here either. Just a normal everyday car, chuck it around in some corners, and it is really fun. Next track is Lake Louise. Now, I must admit, I don't really know if this track is actually that good. You do have a lot less grip and the tracks are generally bigger. I found it quite difficult to drive on, but that was mainly the car's fault with some serious turbo lag, but not a problem with the track itself. It does have a nice range of circuits, some smaller, some bigger, and it's also very fun to drive on, something different as well, so I'm just going to put it in the A tier. Now, the next track in the A tier is High Speed Ring. That's another very fun track. Although it doesn't really have that much turns, you can keep a good speed up throughout the duration of the track, hence the name obviously. It's a very fun track for all classes of cars, particularly those that are faster, but it doesn't work very well in the rain. Now, it's a really iconic track to the series, so yeah, I'm putting it in the A tier. Next track in the A tier is the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Now, this is obviously quite an iconic track, 24 Hours of Le Mans. I personally don't really find it that fun. I think it can, be the same, very repetitive. Long straight brake, long straight brake. But with faster cars, as you can see, like the Peugeot, it can be quite fun to race on, keeping some speed through the corners, and obviously it's really iconic, so it kind of has to be in the A tier, I guess. Now, Monza, this is the best Italian track in the game, in my opinion. Obviously, nothing really comes close to this. It's got a really nice flow, really nice corners, and obviously the straights are really good. And a typical Italian racetrack, really. Really iconic to the series. When people think of Italy, they think of Monza, or kind of I do anyway. Especially in fast cars, you can still think of the Pagani Hyra. It's just so fun, you can just floor it. Also in the A tier is Tsukuba. It's an iconic car. It's actually a really small track, actually, in comparison to the others. In comparison to some of the others, it's a really small track, which means it's suitable for nice cars. Sometimes it is nice just to go back to a plain MX-5 and race it around Tsukuba, because it is actually a lot of fun. I'd say it's probably the best beginner track. Really nice range of turns, really nice straights. Obviously, it's very iconic to the series. I know Gran Turismo 4 getting that rally car and then selling it was kind of what everyone did. But yeah, so Grand Valley, this track has some really nice scenery, probably some of the best in the game. And it was obviously redone. I prefer the old Grand Valley. I think this new Grand Valley is really nice, but it's just not the old one. Now, there's a nice range of corners and a nice range of straights. It's even got 2 tunnels, which is really good. Yeah, there's a lot of action that goes on in this track, really good for racing. Not the best flow in the middle because it is quite start-stop, but it's a very good track and I really like it. I think out of the original 3, Grand Valley, Trial Mountain and Deep Forest, which we'll be talking about in a minute, it is the worst of the 3, purely because of how it's been done, I think, but also the track itself just wasn't really the best. The flow was a little bit off. Also in the A tier, getting in the top of A tier now, is Red Bull Ring. Once again, this is a relatively small track, but it proves that you don't need a massive track to be fun. It's a really iconic part of the Grand Prix. It's been in a lot of Gran Turismo and other games. Got some decent elevation changes, but a really nice range of corners and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a solid A tier track. Nürburgring GP. This is really good for overtakes, typical European Grand Prix circuit, like I talked about the one in Spain. Good flow, good corners. This one, I just prefer it to Spain. There's a lot more. These German and Italian tracks, there's so many races you can do compared to the ones from Brazil and Spain. So even if they're bad tracks, they'd still have their day, if you will. But it's just not as good as its bigger brother. So that's why I was kind of knocked down a little bit. Now we have Fuji. This is the best Japanese track in the game, in my opinion, by far. really iconic to the series. Been in all Gran Turismo games. Really nice to race here, just genuinely fun. It's got good corners, good straights. Really nice straight in the beginning. Really nice pit straight. The only thing is the last 2 corners, the last 3 corners, don't really know what's going on. They have a terrible flow and they just feel really out of place on the track. People that have raced in Fiji, you kind of get a good flow going, you kind of feel your car start setting some time. You get to the last section, it throws your time off massively. Honestly, that's probably what prevents it from being in the S tier. But other than that, a really good track. Dragon Trail. Now this track has really nice scenery, arguably the best in the game. It's the knockoff Monaco, if you will. I wish we did have Monaco, that would be at the top of S tier. But yeah, you can carry lots of speed. I'm going to be talking about the main Dragon Trail. I know the Seaside track is also quite a nice track. That'd probably be in the B tier, but the triangle looking one we're talking about. So yeah, obviously you can carry lots of speed, lots of good straights, and it's pretty decent flow going. Obviously you've got the chicane of death, I think it's called, that catches a lot of people out, and it's really big track. Racing online here is really fun. I have to say I've done some kind of touring car races here, only 300 horsepower hatchbacks and stuff, but even then it was so fun. Yeah, I'd advise you lot to go and race here. Now the final track in the A tier, I believe, is Mount Panorama. Now this is nearly an S tier track. It has the best scenery in the game. It's, I've seen some people say it feels like a journey almost racing on this track. You're driving up obviously a mountain, good flow, insane elevation. Once you're at the top you can look and see out the top of the mountain, and it's just insane. You go from top to bottom. Got a really good straight at the start, good batch of corners, got obviously a couple of normal corners, then we have a couple of tight corners. Then towards the end, or the middle section, there's them really tight kind of S-bends. They're good for overtakes or traffic or whatever. And we've got a nice straight, then we've got some corners there, so it is a really nice track. Unfortunately, the other tracks in the S tier just kind of not significantly, but are just simply better. But I believe if any track wants to go into the S tier, it would be Mount Panorama. It's one of the best tracks in the game. Moving on to the S tier. Now, what separates these tracks from the A tier isn't necessarily the quality of the tracks. If anything, I think the quality of the tracks isn't that much better than that of the A tier, but I think it's how iconic they are to the series. So the first one is obviously Laguna Seca. Now, let's be honest, in terms of a racetrack, it's really not S tier in my opinion. But it's so iconic to the series, man. You can't not put it in the S tier. It's got insane elevation. Obviously that corkscrew is so iconic to the series. There's no other track like it. It's got good scenery, kind of a better version of Willow Springs. Obviously you've got the Ford Roadster license. It's just a really fun track to race on. Yeah, it's got some good corners there, and obviously a pretty decent straight to start with. That this would be the best track in America, or the best USA track, if the next one didn't exist, which is Trial Mountain. Probably one of my favourite tracks in the game. So yes, the best USA track. Now this was redone. Obviously I mentioned earlier about the 3, Grand Valley, Trial Mountain and Deep Forest. I think this track was remade really well, to be honest. A lot better than Grand Valley. Keeps it a lot of how Trial Mountain was, capturing those short turns around the rocks. Also got the tunnels, which are really good. Here your car, which is really nice. Got some good corners and a nice elevation change at the end, and it's really similar to how it was. It's almost like stepping back into Gran Turismo 3, and obviously it's so iconic and it's really fun to race on, especially at night. The straight bit is really wide. It's such a nice track. Now Deep Forest will be the third to last track in the S tier, or the third best track in the game in my opinion. Now I have to be honest, this is probably my favourite track in the game. It's got insane flow. It's so nice racing here, because one corner leads on from another so well that with Santa Cruz or whatever it is, and some others, your start-stop or top of this one you can go through all the corners. You can keep so much speed up it's just really good. And obviously the scenery, once you're looking kind of on that bridge bit, yeah, it's insane. I mean, fair play to Polyphony. It's a really good track. It's satisfying to race here as well, so I hope you like my driving. As you can see with the Porsche Carrera, really nice to race here. So I'll probably leave the gameplay up on screen for a little bit, and you lot can see why I like this track so much. Okay, so the penultimate track, the second best track in the game really, there's no guesses here, Spa. So iconic, obviously that first corner, so many good photos taken there and everything. Does have really nice straight, really nice corners, but it's just such a good track. It's also quite a long track as well. It takes about 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes to complete. Not really much to say really, other than that it's just a really good track. The flow's not best, the range corners and straights is alright, but it's just such an iconic track in real life and in the Gran Turismo series. You can take any car on it. I like usually racing Mercedes and Porsches here, which is really good, as you can see on the screen. And coming up is the Nürburgring Nordschleife, I think that's right. Now this track is levels above all the others. This track is the optimum test for a car's performance. You know, when you say it's, you know, the car's top speed 0 to 60 and the Nürburgring lap time, tests everything of the car. You've got the carousel, which is testing, you know, a bit of elevation. You've got the massive straight test top speed. You've got some nice straights to test the speed through high speed corners, some tight turns to test that the car's braking. So you've got some S-bends to test that the car changed direction. Most of the car tests, but at the same time because it's such a long track, it's, like you said, it's almost a journey, and there's some really satisfying bits when you can kind of cut through the middle. I think you know the area I mean. Which I wasn't aware there was much of a difference between the 24-hour layout and the normal layout, so I'm going to be grouping them all together. And yeah, I like to go in different cars, get some lap times. You can see the Porsche 911 GT3 RS that was added around Nürburgring. Is insane combination, really fun. So yeah, that Nürburgring is the best track in the game, top of S tier. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. What are your favourite tracks? I'd like to hear. As long as they're not Tokyo, then you can have your own opinion. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Goodbye.